Okay, looking into muscles, to start off with, we have three types of muscles, and they're classified into voluntary and involuntary muscles. So the only type of voluntary muscle we have is the skeletal muscle, and they are striated, multinucleated, which means they have multiple nucleuses within the singular cell, and they're also quite large in cell size, and skeletal muscle cells just facilitate movement within the body. We also have cardiac muscle, which is heart muscle, which is striated and branched to allow for simultaneous pumping of the heart contractions, and cardiac muscle just allows your heart to pump. And then lastly, we have smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is not striated, it's smooth, and it lines the inside of your organs, and it facilitates digestion and movement. So the main functions, we have movement, which is skeletal muscles, maintenance of stable posture, because even with our bone structure, muscles just help to keep everything like tight and together. Movement of substances by smooth muscle, and then the generation of body heat through metabolic reactions, and also like shivering, because you need your muscles to shiver. Okay, the properties of muscle tissue that all muscle tissue has starts off with contractility. So it's the ability to contract and generate force when stimulated by a nerve. Extensibility, which is the ability to be stretched beyond normal resting length. So say this is my normal resting length on my muscle. If it is able to be extended, it can be stretched this far. And then elasticity is then the ability to return back to this resting state after the stretch is removed. We also have hypertrophy and atrophy. So hypertrophy is the increase in size of a muscle fiber, and there's two types, transient and chronic. Transient hypertrophy is what we see in the gym when someone gets a pump. So it's like a short time hypertrophy, which comes from kind of like the fluid accumulation and the plasma that's in your muscles. So it gives the impression of a bigger muscle appearance, but it doesn't mean that it automatically leads to an increase in mass of your muscle. The second type is chronic, and chronic is an increase in size from long-term resistance training, and this causes actual structural changes to the muscle, and it increases in the amount of fibers and the size of the individual fibers, and it takes about 6 to 8 weeks of consistent training. Then atrophy is the opposite, and it's a decrease in size of the muscle fibers, and that could be with both loss of mass and loss of fiber number, which lowers your overall muscular strength and affects your type 1 fibers the most, which we'll get to in a second. And atrophy can be caused by injury or illness or just aging. So a motor unit is consisted of a single motor neuron with multiple muscle fibers attached to it. And the all or none principle states that all muscle fibers attached to a motor neuron must contract or relax simultaneously so every motor unit needs to move together. The types of motor units we have start with type 1. So type 1 motor units are slow twitch fibers, and they're fatigue resistant. And they have quite a slow neurotransmission speed, which means they produce quite low muscle force, but they are able to maintain contractions for a really long time. So we're thinking like marathon runners, endurance sports, triathlons, that type of area. And then for type 2A muscle fibers, we have fast twitch, faster neural speed, and stronger force of contraction. These are muscle fibers that are able to sustain bursts of high intensity energy and able to keep going. So we're looking at like medium endurance type sports, like a game of football. And then for type 2X muscle fibers, these muscle fibers are easily fatigued, but they are extremely fast twitch, and they have the fastest contraction time, and they also produce the largest force. However, they cannot be maintained. So this is like the most explosive power you can produce. So anything from like a hang clean or sprints. And then we have the principle of orderly recruitment. So what the principle of orderly recruitment states is that when motor units are activated, because all muscle fibers must contract at the same time, if more force is needed, then more motor units are attracted to produce the force. So type 2A and type 2X muscle fibers produce more produce more force than type 1 does, and they have more muscle fibers. So as the intensity of your movement increases, progressive recruitment happens. So we start with type 1 and we move on to type 2A, and then finally we end with type 2X if there is a need for that type of recruitment to happen. There's no jumping from 0 to 2X. So as the intensity of the movement increases, the smaller motor neurons are recruited first, and then it builds up until you reach that explosive power. And these muscle fibers can be built up through strength training.